Next up, we have the Fireside Chat 3, and the topic for same is AI amplifying detection in white collar investigations. For the same, I would like to call on stage Mr. Tarun Gupta, Deputy Head Operational Risk and Assurance at IndusInd Bank. Please have a huge round of applause, everyone. Joining our moderator on stage, I would like to call our speakers Mr. Abhishek Gemawat, Vice President Legal and Compliance at Zepto. Mr. Amit Pandey, Executive Vice President, Legal and General Counsel at GSK Pharmaceuticals Limited. Let's have a warm round of applause, everyone. And Mr. Amrendra Sinha, Chief Audit Executive at Adani Green Energy Limited. Thank you, everyone. We can start with the session.
Very good afternoon, friends and panelists here. Today we are going to talk about detection and investigation. We have been speaking about it since morning on various aspects of use of AI for white collar crime. If we see that some of the organizations are already using ML and AI in fraud detection, in processing various databases, and in getting out some patterns which are already present in the data that we use. We have with me Abhishek, who is an eminent counsel and has a track record of handling complexities of litigation and compliance. And he has been involved in guiding the leadership in the organization on strategy and leading the crime advisory. So I like his initial thought process on detection and investigations for use of AI in detection and investigation.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for presenting this opportunity of sharing my views. So I think before we get into the actual problem, I think we all should know that this is a very, very serious issue, which every corporates, be it an e-commerce or be it finance or or anybody from manufacturing or services point of view, everybody is sort of grappling with this issue. If you look at the few important statistics also, the number of serious fraud investigation cases which have come to light if you take an average, it's more than 500. If you look at the CBI cases only dealing with white collar investigations, it is more than 6,000 per year, right? And you all know how ED is being in action since since the Modi government. They have been very, very active in terms of implementing PMLA or maybe Fugitive Offenders Act, etc., etc. While we all understand that this is a serious issue, the only way to sort of tackle this, and I'm sure the other panelists at the previous sessions also mentioned that the problem should be traced at its very beginning or the origin, right? Unless and until we can do that, the kind of tech measures and all things which we are doing are only going to be reactive approaches for doing that, right? We all have to be sort of very, very proactive in handling that. And I'll just give you a practical example which we faced a few months back, right? There is an entity called OTP Mart. You all can just go through that as well. That entity is actually giving fake mobile numbers and fake OTPs to the customers. By using that, they charge some minor consideration for that. Companies like Zepto, Swiggy, and Flipkart, for all companies, they have separate considerations. Customer can actually use that particular mobile number and OTP and place the first transaction, because customers are also aware that if you're doing the first transaction, if you're a new user, you'll get a lot of benefits. So this is the kind of frauds which are happening and grappling the companies like us, right? If you look at this at scale, you can only imagine that if a platform is doing tens of lakhs of orders every single day, and there are abuses like this, then this needs to be tackled. So when we had sort of investigated and tried to get deep into it, the only common solution which came across is AI, right? While I'll talk about the latest techniques which are available in the market, and also which the modern e-commerce companies like us sort of implement for tackling this kind of frauds, the emphasis is, if you are using AI in terms of solving frauds or white collar crimes like this, the chances of this happening reduces by 30%. And this is something which is given under McKinsey, Deloitte, and there is an association of certified fraud examiners also. They say that if you are sort of implementing AI and machine learning tactics in your strategies while you are devising the overall product strategy, then you are 50% faster than the entities who are not using it. 50% faster. So I think with this, maybe I would also like to hear the thoughts from other panelists as well. But yeah, we have to understand that the magnitude is humongous, huge. Our customers teach us what kind of frauds they come up with. There is hacking, ethical hacking, everything which is very, very prevalent in the market. The customers throw us the ideas, and sort of we have to continuously build our strategy so that we are one step ahead of the customers at all point in time.
Thanks, Abhishek. What I get from you is that the people who are doing the white collar crime are using technology, and to counter it, we need technology. And the whole game is about who's going to have a better technology, who's going to better it every time that a new thing comes in the market. And that's one way of tackling the white collar crime that we have. We have with us Amrinder, who has got a vast experience in finance and audit in Tata and Adani groups. And he has led hundreds of investigations in white collar crime. And he has been very closely associated with the board in developing a risk framework for these groups. So I'll request him to share his insights into how technology can be leveraged, and how investigation and detection framework can be built in an organization. Amrinder.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So, since morning we have a couple of sessions, and we know that what is special today, this is Yoga Day. But there is one more thing that nobody told, that today is the longest day of the year also because of northern summer solstice. Now, this is how your brain works, because you get biased with the data. Everybody started because of the presentation and other things, Yoga Day, you forget about the other things. When Yoga Day was not even inception was done, summer solstice is since beginning, but you forgot that past. That is what is happening in terms of fraud framework also. So how do you build fraud framework? The people who are implementing the framework or developing the framework, many times what happens, they don't know the ground situations. And my colleague once mentioned that the world is 2/3 full of water and 1/3 auditor from the headquarters. That is how it is built. So you don't know actually what is happening at the site. And without knowing that you are going to implement the fraud framework, we will never come to know. Now the new animal that also has come, AI, artificial intelligence. First of all, we should also ponder on that why this is called artificial intelligence. Why it was not called SI, smart intelligence, very good name, but why artificial? It is because machine can never replace human, human intelligence. It can never be smarter than human, and that's why it has to go with the artificial intelligence. It's not a smart intelligence. Now coming in the developing the framework, many times in the organization, the first issue that people grapple that who is the responsible to develop the fraud framework. If you refer the Company Act and Board and Audit Committee, you say that board has the supreme power to decide that. After board, who is leading this? Is it chief internal auditor, or it's a risk committee separately, or it's a one person in charge of entirely audit, risk and fraud? Because even as per the standard right now, you can't have a uniformity that whether ERM and risk and fraud should be led by one person or should be multiple function because of difference of conflict of interest and other things. So we ourselves are not clear that going forward how these functions should lead. But anyway, we have to lead with that. If you are getting a chance to implement fraud framework, what you should do is start. First of all, it's not a unified framework that will be implemented everywhere, except some common processes like P2P, HR and all. Entire fraud is completely different based on your own industry, even in the same industry based on your own process implemented. It's not that if you are in the FMCG, all FMCG related fraud is everywhere. What loopholes you have built in your respective industry? Because who are fraudsters? A person who are like us thinking at the same time to build control, the other set of people, they are just thinking to how to bypass this control. It's a game of control versus people bypassing the control. So unless you understand your business, you can't have a right set of fraud framework. So second step that if you are leading to implement the framework, you have to first make the list of your entire process. Then third comes that whether this fraud control, FRCM also as we call it, whether that should be audited in the same manner in the same program internal audit, or there should be a separate program for that also. Even if the same program is there, whether you should have different test steps or checking methods for that. And then once you develop that, because of the increasing size and scale, it's not normally done by humans, so there comes the use of AI. So what AI will help you? It will give you the data insights, but who has to decide insights? It's on the auditor, it's on the person who is challenging that fraud schema and all. So human part you can never take it out. There will be ample data, there will be ample correlations, but as a human you need to understand that whether it is effective correlation. For example, correlation is such a beautiful thing. You can give correlation between two data which are either related or even non-related. For example, you get the data of liquor consumption in India and growth in population in Pakistan, and just draw a curve. You will get a positive correlation. And you will say data is correlated because liquor consumption is increasing, population is also increasing. But what is happening? The data is not relevant to you because their data is not dependent. So using AI or writing code, you first have to understand whether I am getting the right data, right correlation in that. Because if you compare your past 10 years and now, earlier the problem was that how this could be done. I have the idea, but I don't know how to code that, how to get insights, how to make a program. So that time challenge was different. Now you know everything. You just give the idea. There are 10 people sitting in your company in IT, in outsource contract with other IT. They will easily code for you. Problem is not coding anymore. Problem is that what needs to be done. And then how to repeat that program effectively and how to report it back. And another last thing I would like to mention that what is happening now. Earlier, if you ask anybody any questions, it was not that social media was not that upright, so that you are fearing that anybody will say me something. Now even fraud investigations are very, very crucial. You just can't investigate like traditional days because you never know who is doing what doing investigation and where from this media hype can come. So you have to use AI very diligently in terms of investigations also. So entire framework if your company has right now, you need to relook with the changing technology, changing perception, changing mindset, and then you can implement it effectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Avinder. I'll take this, I'll ask Mr. Amit, who has got a wide and diverse experience. He's run decades of his experience in dealing with white-collar crime. And he's again been associated with the senior management very closely. in developing structures for dealing with white collar crime. So I'll want his insights into what are the current trends in AI in use of for white collar investigations, and how specifically the traditional methods have been laid off and new methods have been brought in for investigation and detection.
Thanks, Tarun. Before I start, I would like to give a disclaimer that views that I express will be my own, not of the organization that I represent. It's important because I won't discuss anything about the organization in this panel. But you raised a very important subject, is how AI has enabled detection of the fraud. First of all, it depends on the appetite of the organization, how they look at a situation to be a fraud or not. Right? Many organizations, and I've seen this based on my experience working with domestic Indian companies as well as MNCs, the definition of fraud itself is skewed. Many don't regard that as a fraud, and that's the result. SEBI had to come up with a requirement where they say that if you are indulging in forensic audit, you have to report it to the stock exchanges. You have to give an outcome of what that report was. So there is a lack of transparency within the organizations when it comes to fraud. The approach with the organization is like, instead of detecting fraud, look at the loopholes which is getting extracted, because if you leave money on the table, there will be someone who will take it. So interesting discussion I heard in the previous panel where people talked about deterrence, talked about the audit framework that is there, but how rigorously it is followed and how it penetrates into the organization is the key to really understand the nature and the character of the fraud. Artificial intelligence, which is the topic for today's discussion, has become very crucial, and there are multiple tools, but then you have to be very, very careful which tool you are adopting for an investigation. Because any investigation would result into an outcome, and an outcome would result into an impact on an individual or the organization. And that has to be established in the code of law. And the interesting part is, the fraudster doesn't need to establish that he has committed a fraud, but the organization has to have a credible evidence to demonstrate that the person involved was in a fraud. So the onus is on the organization, onus is on the person or the auditors or the investigators to kind of demonstrate that there was a fraud which is committed. To this effect, the AI that you use, be it for data crunching, numbers that you see which are, and mostly when I talk about fraud, I'll restrict it to financials because money is the motivator which creates fraud. So whenever there is a situation, the money is involved, and generally money is involved only in two instances and it's generally my experience, it's either with the procurement where the money goes out of the organization, or with the people who are bringing it in, which is the sales force or the people who are dealing with money where they have been given amount to spend to get more business. And that in those areas, if you don't have a good check, in those areas, if you don't have artificial intelligence looking and monitoring their day-to-day operations and giving you a real-time or a data which is making sense, it seldom results into kind of a fraud. So if you derive a scheme wherein you enable someone to take a call on monetary aspects, and that is not monitored internally by the organization, is left to AI to monitor itself, like we are talking about generative AI or other, then you will have more bigger frauds than normal frauds which we have seen. My initial days dealing with investigation, a lot of time and effort used to go on collating evidences, physical, some use of computers, I'm talking about early 2000s, some use of computers to get the data, correlate it with the activity which is the subject matter of the fraud. But as we have moved around, I think many things have automatically been thrown out by the systems, be it the ERP system that the organization uses, or for a particular forensic audit, whatever is the tool deployed. Because the canvas of forensic audit has also enlarged now. All of us have mobile phones, emails, all of us have our personal domain which falls into the privacy aspect. To make a sense of the activity which has resulted into a fraud, you've got to look at all those aspects and take out the relevant portion of the data which would establish that the person was involved in a fraud. So tools which kind of differentiate based on character readings, based on the words which kind of detects that the person was involved in some kind of activity which should be looked in deeper. So those are the tools which are getting deployed. And these tools mostly give you 80 to 90% of the outcomes which are positive. But there are false positives also. So you have to ultimately, based on that, it has reduced the time gap within which the investigations happen. And earlier, if I've seen that to correlate, if in the previous days an investigation used to take 6 months to come to a conclusion, now it generally happens in a month or two, depending on the nature of the fraud which is under investigation. So, but again, there is a legal aspect to it. So I'll talk more from a legal standpoint because there has to be a policy within the organization to use certain kind of AI. You just can't use AI which is off-shelf available in the open market and deploy that for the investigation. You have to have a policy using artificial intelligence, and that policy should enable you to use certain type of artificial intelligence for detection of the data. Because when the matter goes to the courts, these all things become very relevant. Because if you're taking a source or a AI from an open source and using that data, the authenticity of the data itself gets questioned. So, and then that leads it to a different outcome altogether. So I think more and more use of AI, but in a very responsible manner with a proper policy in place, and again, a deterrence to make everybody aware that we are watching. And that happens when you have continuous audits being done, leveraging those AIs that you use for detection of the fraud, and catch them early. If you don't catch them early, probably it will then bite you later on in a much bigger form. So that's been my experience on this.
So, Amit, what I also hear from you is that the data authentication, or the data that we are going to use, may be again layered up over a period of time, and the authenticity of the data may itself be questionable. So, considering the authenticity of data, what are the legal implications that we have in use of AI while doing investigations? How would you react to that?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting space, right? While initially when somebody looks at a data and correlates it with the fraud, the person, because of the fact that there has been a loss to the organization, I think 10 out of 9 would be, 9 out of 10 would be looking at it and saying that we have very strong evidence to implicate the person. But when it goes to the courts, and when it really gets debated and the councils kind of look at it and the court looks at it, they look at it from the fact that whether this data was subject to some kind of manipulation or not. Is this data absolutely clear that you can say that the person behind this was the only person responsible for it?
Are we able to establish those kind of
In some instances we are, if it is a very clear-cut outcome. And as I said, if there is a policy, we have those AIs already installed in the organization, and we demonstrate that this is part of our policy. It is laid down in our code of conduct, which says that we will have these kind of data, be it for a TNL related frauds or be it for for any kind of spend that is authorized to an individual.
Right.
So if it is laid down as per a policy and you have a system checking it and you have an audit which has a record showing that the data was always used to establish the reports, basis which the management has given their opinions and they've expressed their views in the annual reports, then it is accepted by the courts. Okay. And then you will have to really establish that this data itself was protected to an extent that nobody could manipulate it. There is a control which is in place when no one else has an access to this data. Then the person who is giving a certificate to the effect that the outcome is the evidence based on which the person is implicated. But again, this is a very, very delicate nuance, and many companies and organizations fails in establishing that the data that they've used for evidences are coming from the authentic source. And it was part of the policy and the way the company governs. So, and it gives a little bit of leeway to the lawyers like us, not on the other side, the fraternity, to really take the loopholes in a particular case and decide whether there was culpability of the person or not. Second is, many times organizations don't want something to be taken to the courts.
Exactly.
Right? So, going to the court is the ultimate, I think, is a decision that the organization takes. If they feel that if they don't go, there will be a reputational issue. If there is no reputational issue, many of the organizations will like to close the investigation at their level itself, even at the cost of taking monetary hit.
That's a
They may
major-
just
major
separate the
deterrent.
individual from the organization and see that this is a learning and put into effect a control which would not allow this thing to happen again. Only in situations where there are obligations that you report, like I said, if it's a listed entity, it has to report out of major fraud which is material in nature. And materiality depends on the revenues and the turnovers and the profitability of the organization. Then you go and report out, and then you follow up, because once you've reported, you can't leave it like that. It's not a government of India or any ministry that you can just buck it up, right? So you have to then take it up to the logical conclusion. And that's where I think the data that you generate using any artificial intelligence becomes very credible, because then the artificial intelligence gets discussed in the court. What is the efficacy of that artificial intelligence? What is the authenticity of that tool which has been deployed? And you will have to not only generate data for that particular individual, but for some other individual also, to demonstrate that it has worked seamlessly like an electronic voting machine, which has gone up to the Supreme Court, and then Supreme Court had to say that it works well. Something like that has to be established, and
Correct.
without
Exactly.
without any kind of a doubt with the courts, and that would then give you the kind of result that you want. It's a very many organizations look it as a very painful proceedings. They do it only when there are compulsions for them to do it. As you know, our system is such that starts with the district court, goes up to the Supreme Court, and takes multiple years of follow-up. So many cases are pending in the court, which
That's
get settled later on when things die down and kind of nobody looks at it. It settles subsequently. But at least one round of litigation it does go.
And another thing, do the courts have the sufficient skill level or the sufficient knowledge to handle
That's
such a vast
that's a $1 million
array
question.
of...
To explain the judge what an AI does itself is a big
Okay.
issue. But we are seeing, so there are specific, depends on what kind of fraud has happened, right? Some of the frauds initially go to the tribunals also, where you have qualified chartered accountants and professionals sitting in the bench. But if it goes to a normal bench, and this again legal plays out, because see, the moment you take action and you file something against an individual, that individual could be part of a union, that individual could be part of some other organization. He goes and files a case and takes a stay in some other court, labor court or something, and then you have to go and establish that it is not an employment related case, it is something to deal with a person who has violated our code of conduct and got into a monetary fraud. So it's a
Complexities of the legal
complex thing. So first you got to convince the individual that we have sufficient to implicate him.
Right.
Once he knows that, then the options and negotiation and discussion starts. Mostly the person will resign and go, because it's an easy way out. But if the nature of the fraud is such that, as I said, it's material, you have to report it to the regulators, you cannot allow that person to just go like that. Now the question comes whether it is a cognizable offense under the Indian Penal Code to go and file an FIR in the local police station for the nature of fraud that the person has done. When and how you will establish that itself is a challenge. Who is going to file it? What is the allegation that will be done? Because if you file that, it becomes a criminal case, and then criminal case proceedings are different in nature.
Right.
Yeah, you leave it there and you don't go ahead further. If it is in the nature of financial fraud, which is not within the ambit of the Indian Penal Code, but it's coming under the other sections of the Act, then you have to decide what course of action you have to. So it's not one fit for all, right? It depends the kind of fraud which has happened. Generally, so my experience dealing with Indian companies and MNCs are more structured in terms of the processes and the tools that they use. So the situation of going to the courts seldom comes. It's like you avoid that and you don't go to court most of the time. Indian companies, they have their own way of dealing with the matter, right? So sometimes they feel because it's listed entity and they have to report out, so they do file a case in the court. They also, depending on the nature of the fraud which has happened, they also go and file it in the local police and let the normal investigation proceed in that manner. But generally it is a time-consuming affair, and nobody wants to devote its time once they know that they've been defrauded. Once it is a shame because you don't have enough system in place to really catch it early. Second, having known now you have something, it also is a thought for you to look at it in a way that how you can not allow such things to happen in future. And of course, deterrence. Deterrence is missing in our country. And I mean, to give you an example, if you go to Dubai and somebody steals something, you know what will happen to that person. Nobody knows here what will happen to the person if he steals. So it's on you to make the system foolproof. It's on you to, and that what makes India unique, because our systems are far ahead of the world in terms when it comes to money. And you're a banker, you know better that banking frauds, which are very rampant, be it because of fake videos or fake imposting that people do.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of awareness also which is coming because
Right.
of that. And I think we are ahead of others in terms of ensuring
And our
that.
regulators and I think so the government of India,
Yeah.
everybody is putting in their bit
Our fraud is
into-
different of nature. It is blessed from the top. It is not from the bottom, right? So if we clean up the top, I think we will much better. But again, the data really helps you because the data shows the trend. The data shows where the fraud is emanating from, and every fraud has its own reasons, which again gets looked at in the court as to why that fraud happened. Some companies will look at it saying that we ourselves created an environment which created that fraud. Some will say that no, the person itself had a behavioral issue, he created a fraud. So it's multiple aspect which gets discussed at the court level. So generally the idea is not to go to court unless you're forced upon and the fraud is so big that you can't hide it.
Thanks to that very good insight on the legal aspects. Although, you know, so much of established legalities are there, such good legal systems with such a big legacy behind us on the legal aspects. Very extensive, court systems at each level of the society and appellant authorities present, but still we have those challenges coming up. Another important aspect that you mentioned during your discussion was on data. Because we have been seeing throughout these journeys on technology that data becomes the secret ingredient everywhere for any leverage of technology or anything. So I'd like to hear from Amar on how the data can be understood better, how we can analyze or classify data better for AI detection, investigation, and how to use this data.
Thank you. So we did this journey of data analytics, AI, and getting insights in 2018 in Adani. Okay. So what we did, there are mainly ERP data are available in system, but when it comes to fraud, you can't do just based on the ERP data. So there comes the concept of structural data versus unstructured data. Earlier, it was little difficult to analyze or get insight from the unstructured data, but now you have different tools where you can get it. So now you forget about the nature of data. You must focus on the type of data, actual data which you are required to build insights, irrespective whether it is structured or unstructured. And there the concept came of the data lake. So what we did, we created a data lake where data from the different systems, either production data, financial data, SAP data, whatever system data you call it, that comes to data lake. So there you need to do little bit of coding to data cleansing, and then a bit of program that how you get insights from this cleansed data. And there you need some coder who will code for you, and some testing for the positive or negative result, whatever is happening. So if in terms of process flow you want to understand, then first you have to collect the data. That is the first phase. Collection is easy. Where to collect, you either have a data lake or you have now you are using cloud. Different clouds are there, Google Cloud, Microsoft Cloud and all. Cloud also gives you facility to collect all sorts of data where you can cleanse the cloud itself. There is a feature. And then you can take out from the cloud to a respective insights level what you want to do it. And you need to retest it with the user basically, because many times at the first iteration, you will get the false positive. Because the moment you get insight and you are saying, oh, I got this fraud, but there must be some missing link in your analysis with data. User will come and further give you the evidence, this is happening or this pattern is happening because of this. So first set it will not be right. So while developing insights is not only that internal auditors or technology, actual where the data is getting generated, why it is getting generated, what activity it performs, you need to have a cross-functional team to understand it first. And then once you are done with that, you have our POC, you can get insights. So initial phase, we developed around 75 insights on the procurement related and HR related, and we definitely got beautiful insights. Now insights, something very classic. If you have seen the weighbridge operation, the weighbridge data is also getting in ERP punched to the system, and it will give you that in-out, truck in-out, and so many analytics. But one rare fraud that has come, that while data was getting migrated from the actual weighbridge use to punch in the ERP, through that Wi-Fi, you can infrared or whatever sending mechanism was there, somebody was just cutting in the middle and changing the data itself. Now your AI will not help you that what is happening because you are getting source right, you are getting output right. But somebody had manipulated data in between it. And there you can get insights only when if you have some past records of the truck number, nature of data, and you do some analysis, you can see some continuous outliers. For that, you need to have little bit of understanding on the data movement. One is collection, but very basic, all auditors and everyone who is working on the fraud, you must prepare by your own, not by given by the company that flowchart. Entire data communogram, how data is generation till final use of data. Once you draw it by your hand, that will give you supreme understanding of that rather than reading the flowchart. And therefore, each step, if you want to see that what could go wrong. Because interesting fact is that we all are, I mean, banking, you say, infrastructure, say, company says, they are having a lot of funds to build all this AI. And who are the fraudsters, if you see, they are not backed by so much startup or money. They are sometimes individual, sometimes one or two persons. If they can think of out of this system, which is being developed by so many cross-functional team and party, but one or two guys, he is thinking otherwise himself or by the collaboration, and he is able to do it. So ultimately, it's human brain that is important rather than developing that AI insights. In my past, all this investigation, one thing I could see that yes, control definitely works, that maker, checker, SOD, whatever you call it. And mostly, unless you have someone from the inside, a single person doing fraud, chance is very, very less now. Because all the controls are structured in that way, it will be little difficult for a person to get start till end all the activity by bypassing all the controls. So sometimes you need to have a behavioral analytics gradually in your department. Few department to where you can see the most, something can happen, some red flags are already there. You should sometimes focus on the behavioral analytics. That will give you first trigger. Even the fraudster even start thinking, before that he will pop up something that something is not within the line or control limit. And that will help you in designing the systems. In actual technology, there are so many technology, I think you can just Google it and find out that what suits you, because based on the technology, scale and size, cost also varies. So I can't tell you just take Alteryx and that will help you, or take some SQL or other Google Cloud Analytics. There are so many analytics are there. It has to be customized based on your organization need. Thank you.
Yeah. So one point that you touched upon was on the behavioral analytics side. And I think so that is coming into focus in the industry once again, because what kind of media tools that you are using, what kind of preferences that you are using, based on that, based on the collection of that data, particularly, you can come to a conclusion what is the relevance or what is the final linkage of a person to committing a fraud. On these good insights, Abhishek, I'd like your last insight into highlighting how AI can be used for preemptive detection.
Sure. So I think in the interest of the time, I'll keep my answer short. But having said that, we all should agree that your traditional Excel will also stop giving you analysis if your data size is very, very bulky, right? So you have to have dependency on the modern tools like your pattern analysis, where behavioral pattern of a particular user cohort can be done, and the insights can be very well evaluated by the companies. Then we also have ML algorithms, which essentially talks about unusual patterns which a particular user or a customer or maybe employee for that matter is showcasing. One key thing which I also want to point out, and the tactic which is being used in modern day investigations is NLP, which is National Language Programming, right? So I'll give you one example as well, where there was one employee who gave the instructions to a vendor to transfer certain amounts to unidentified individuals, and that vendor is sending out a notice to the company stating that I acted upon the instructions of your employee, so so the company has to pay. That there was no malified intentions on our part. So when we deep dived into this investigation and using the NLP tactics, where we analyzed the communications which were happening between the employee and the vendor, it seemed that the vendor was also in full connivance and was in full knowledge of the fraud which was happening, right? So the modern tactics like preemptive analysis, pattern analysis, NLP can go long way in terms of setting right expectations. He talked about the traditional investigation timelines as well, right? Where it was taking 6 months for us to even sort of come out at some conclusion. Now it is being reduced to some number of days, right? When we are doing this sort of analysis. So to conclude, modern organizations like us should adopt AIs, but having said that, they should also be mindful of what tactics suit at a particular organization or for a particular use case. I think if we are mindful about that and use AI tactics very, very smartly, I think we should be able to tackle large number of frauds in-house only. So
Thanks.
these are my
Thanks.
claims.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
One more point I just wanted to add here, that by the use of NLP and large language model, LLM, rather than happening to the main function, it has also helped to the fraudster in writing the correct English. Earlier, if you see some phishing email, you could have easily found out that it is a phishing email. But now, if you get any phishing email developed by AI, use of LLM and NLP, it will be very difficult to doubt that whether it's a phishing email or it's an original email. So that also is helping other way around.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for enlightening us and giving us so many highlights on the use of AI for detection and prevention. And thank you for being here. With this, we come to a conclusion that it's a cat and mouse game, and we have to always be better our game and always be on top of what are the tactics that the fraudsters are applying, and we need to excel every day in this Tom and Jerry game. Thank you.